The devil is a lie.
Just like magic, I'm attracted. I get everything I want 'cause I attract.
Do not eat meat that has not been drained of its blood. Do not practice fortune telling or witchcraft.
First, do like a little bit of Bible history here. So the Bible, it didn't start with King James, okay? King James speaks English. The Bible was translated into English. What was the original text? We had some Aramaic and we had Hebrew and we had Greek, we had some Latin. So we have to take all of this into consideration. We also have to take into consideration the time period. Where were the children of Israel or the people of the Bible? Where were they pulling from? Where were they getting their information from? Where were they getting a lot of their rituals and their practices from? From their captors. A lot of the practices that we do in church, they came from their captors, from the Babylonians, from the Canaanites, and they integrated a lot of these practices into their practice. One good example is Moses, when he went back to go get his people, to go free his people, because the burning bush, spoke to him and said, go back and go free my people. What did he do? They had a magical face-off. A lot of that magic and divination that he learned from the Egyptians, he used on them. All right, so this is on page 42. Go over Leviticus. So Leviticus, Levi, the tribe of Levi. Most of this information in the book of Leviticus is directed towards the tribe of Levi because they were the Levitical priests. Now, all of them got the opportunity to go into the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies would be like the temple, the sacred temple. But all of them had duties that were priestly duties. Some of them were outside of the temple. You had also Miriam, which is Moses' sister. She was a praise dancer. She also had other duties. Only the specific branch or category or a handful of the Levites were able to go into the Holy of Holies, and they had to do a series of practices, go through almost like a training, if you will, and an anointing, and they had to go through the Day of Atonement. Dr. Justin Sledge has an amazing in-depth video on his channel, Esoterica, about the Day of Atonement and the magical practices. It was a bloodbath, okay? They were playing in blood. You can check out his channel and check out that video, but I do mention a little bit about that in my book, just a very little bit. Anyways, so you had to go through a great deal to be a high priest. All right, so that book of Leviticus is primarily targeted towards them and the things that they should do, they should not do. So Leviticus 19, and this one specifically 26. Why is it grouped here? Do not eat meat with blood still in it. Do not practice divination and magic. Why would that be grouped together? Eating meat with blood still in it. Okay, we'll be talking about blood magic. Like how I said, their blood rituals, people would be horrified by their blood rituals, okay? So not only are we talking about like in the New Testament with Christ and all that other blood magic that they did, but blood magic was practiced in the Holy of Holies. They would take so many bulls, sacrifice those bulls, sheep, and then we also know about the scapegoat. They would use herbal sorcery and magic to pretty much put the scapegoat in this trance. So that way the scapegoat, they would read the patterns of the scapegoat, how the scapegoat would walk through the desert until they reached the cliff. And then when the scapegoat would go over the cliff, they watched the scapegoat as they go over the cliff. And as they splattered and hit the ground down below, they would go down there and they would read the entrails. All of this different stuff that they would do, you do not get this in the regular scriptures, okay? They're not going to go into those details because it was a sacred practice. That's how they got their communication from God. It's no different than the Greeks. You know, a lot of the Greek culture, the Babylonian and Canaanite culture is all ingrained into the Bible, but we aren't taught to read it like this. So that's how they will get a lot of their information. Why do they group the scriptures and divide them up the way that they divide them up? Because it seems to be two different things that they're saying. Do not eat meat that still has blood in it. Why is that? Because they say there's life in blood, but they also would read the blood. they would read the patterns of the blood. They would read the splatters of the blood. They would read the type of blood, the color of the blood, the coagulation of the blood. Do not practice divination or seek omens. All right, so what type of divination are they talking about here? And I'm going to hone in on 19, 26, and 30. These scriptures contain caution against engaging with mediums, spirits, and divination and seeking omens. However, when translated, Av and Yedoni are terms used in the Hebrew Bible to describe specific types of sorcery and divination. Specific types. Av or Ab refers to a medium. Now, the Ab of Endor, that's where you could hear the Ab of Endor or the Witch of Endor. And I think I have a blog post about that. But I'm going to, a quick side note, you guys. I'm writing a book about women and goddesses in the Bible. So she will be one of those women that are in the Bible that I'm going to highlight, okay? Without going into too much detail about her. One of the things, the reason why they would single her out, not just because she was an Ab of Endor, which is also like, you know, their indirect enemy, but her practices, some say that the practice, like, okay, so you know about wineskins, and it's likened to the stomach, the gut, and the gut was, I guess you would consider maybe to be sacred, but speaking from the gut, almost like a ventriloquist, was considered to be evil. Sometimes they would say like it was a demon in the gut, or it's like some spirit that's trapped in the gut. So in some scholars would say that the Ab of Endor was speaking from her gut. Some say that she conjured up the spirit of Samuel and then had him speak, or either take on in her body and speak through her body. And those were considered to be, those practices necessarily weren't considered to be evil. What it was is that what she had to do in order for to conjure up the spirit. So some say that the pit also could represent, if it's not just the pit of the stomach or the pit of the arm, which I will get into in a moment, it will be like a pit that they would sacrifice, have a human sacrifice or some type of a blood sacrifice. So it could be an animal sacrifice, or either sometimes it will be a human. And they will have to sacrifice that in that pit in order for to conjure up the spirit. And that was the direct sin of the Ab. Now going back to with the pit of the arm, this is going to sound weird, okay? But through my research, all right? So the Yedoni was either a bird, a specific type of bird, a forbidden bird that the Ab would use to speak through, like the spirit will inhabit the Ab, and it would speak through that bird, or either they would take the beak of the bird, place it under the pit, and it would speak on its own. Hey you guys, editing Ashley here. So I forgot to mention about with the Ab of Endor and the beak of the bird. Sometimes they would keep the bird in a cage. I read this. They will keep the bird in a cage, and they will only take the bird out when they needed specific answers. So sometimes they will bring it other gifts or certain types of foods, etc. Another thing that I read is that, or either they would sacrifice that bird, therefore you have your blood sacrifice, and they would take the beak of that bird and place it under the arm. I also read that this is likened to some of the African traditions, like they didn't really specify what type of African traditions it was, but that in some indigenous cultures such as Africa, that like a dodo bird or a bird would be used in this manner. So that's what they were likening this practice to. And another one I read was about like the spirit will go into a bottle. The bottle, or either the pit, or the pit of the stomach, the pit of the arm, or either the pit, and reckon to like a pit, like wherever they would do the ritual. Sounds very weird, but I promise you it is real. You can go look all this up here. I have the original Hebrew, the words right here, as well as like the phrases, so you can go look it up for yourself. I provide the resources so people can always read and research this stuff for themselves. Okay, so that's the reason why she was considered to be evil. Because another thing too, conjuring a spirit or talking or conversing with a spirit or conversing with the dead is not considered to be evil, because we have Elijah and Elisha that laid on two different instances where they laid on a dead boy's body to bring the spirit back into the body. But remember, touching dead bodies was considered to be like a no, you're not supposed to do that. That's the type of divination that they're talking about. They're talking about the divination that like the 𝐻𝐸 would use. And remember, I told you about necromancy, that type of divination. Now, once again, now you had the priests and some prophets practicing necromancy. Okay? We had Jesus raising the body from the dead. Is that not necromancy?